Hi, Nath. Good to be
Hi,
with you
Andre.
again. Good to be with you again. Yeah, so I don't think we need much introduction into what is happening into the world at the moment. It's been a flurry of activity for the last, I don't know, what is it, 72 hours or so?
Yeah,
And
the last few days been very active. I think the bombing uh, of the nuclear facilities has really kind of changed the dynamic of the conflict. Um, Definitely gave it a lot more attention, in the region and globally. Yep.
right, well, I mean, it's a pretty major move to attack a country because you can say, like what Trump has said, no, no, it's not a war, it's just an attack. But when you send 125 planes and you shoot missiles from submarines and you drop I think it was something like 14 30,000 pound bombs in a country.
Yes.
uh, Most countries, well, at minimum, any country would interpret that as an act of war. And I think he thought that by doing this they would be forced to negotiate, but that hasn't happened yet. What's happened is that they're shooting back, including now attacking the American air bases. So, what are the chances that the US doesn't reply to that? They're probably pretty low. The US will probably reply now to those attacks, and you know
It's
that
the
could get them.
domino effect of,
Yeah.
attack, defense, attack. Um, I think maybe if we kind of want to look at all this kind of little bit step by step, obviously it looks like this was planned. The strike from the US was planned. There was a couple scenarios, and this was probably the safest scenario for Trump, looking at kind of the mastery of the sky over Iran. Uh, and it was, when you think about it, pretty low risk.
Hmm.
Um, and with some sort of a big effect. And so from that standpoint, it really made an impact, but I think we haven't really gotten the full understanding of what that strike did. It looks now that there's a fair amount of uranium that was moved.
Hmm.
So even though some of the sites were really damaged, but um, if I don't know if you've seen videos and photos of some of those trucks that were lined up, clearly the uranium was moved. At least a chunk of it was moved, and so it. If you look at this strike, it probably reached a certain goal, but did it really achieve? If it was the goal to completely obliterate, which was what Trump said, the whole uranium enrichment facilities in Iran, it did not reach that goal.
No, and the thing is, that's exactly it. Is what is the actual impact? And through my model of looking at things through the astrology of the country charts for Israel, Iran, the US, and then especially Trump and Netanyahu, I posted a video a few days ago, which I'm actually going to say to my viewers, I encourage you to watch it again if you haven't, if you already did. And if you haven't watched it, I encourage you to watch it, because this is what often happens when you say something about a conflict. I presented it as Netanyahu's vulnerabilities in this situation, even though Netanyahu looks like he has the upper hand. And I think also that's why Trump attacked when he attacked, because he saw that Israel was running all over Iran and looked a lot stronger. And Trump's way of operating is, oh, if there's a win somewhere, he wants a part of that. And as you
Yes.
say, there was less risk, so let's go in and do this thing, right? The problem is that both of them, Netanyahu and Trump, have very complicated alignments. But unfortunately, if you are looking to, see some downtrend for them, a lot of people don't like either of these two guys for good reason.
Mm,
They're both very unlikable. They're like thugs, to be honest, the way they behave. And the problem is this happens more next year because the Saturn energy catches up to both of them in 2026. And so in the near term, it may look like some kind of victory. I am very skeptical that this continues into the future. And even in the near term, well, you're already seeing it. Did it really happen? Where's the uranium? Iran seems to be doing the opposite of quitting. They're saying, no, no,
yes.
no. Now even the citizens of Iran, even though the citizens of Iran, by and large, most people believe that the people that live there don't like the Ayatollah. That's probably true, but they
True.
don't like being bombed. So now they're out in the street,
Of course.
complaining, and they want their country to fight back. Winning these situations is very difficult. Even when you have a big army, it's very, very complicated. The other thing that I saw earlier today, I don't know if you saw this thing where now Russia is talking about helping Iran with their nuclear weapons, and then Trump was saying, "Hey, what did I just hear? Is this? How can you be saying this? Putin is the boss. Why?" Medvedev, the prime minister, made this remark. In other words, we've got a bit of a mess situation here as a result of this
Yeah.
attack, much more than, oh, this is a clean strike and everything is going to be
Correct.
perfect. So, but again, if you're saying the kinds of things I was talking about in my video about Netanyahu and his problems, they catch up to him in 26 and 27, which, by the way, is the way these things tend to work. You start a conflict and you take shots at people. It very frequently happens later. It doesn't happen right
Yes.
away. It'd
Hmm.
be easy. Look what Putin in Ukraine. He was going to walk in and that it would be finished. Apparently, as many as 1 million Russian soldiers have died in that war. That's what I
Not
saw somewhere.
surprised. Yes.
So I'm sure he wasn't counting on that, and the cratering of his economy, because his economy has been decimated by the expenditure of the war. And that was in February of 2022.
True.
We're now
Yes.
3 years later when the superpower invaded the little guy. So we've got another version of this here where, yeah,
Hmm.
the US is the superpower, but to conquer Iran or to, make Iran quit, what would you have to do? Are you going to drop a nuclear bomb on them? I mean, this is crazy. It's crazy talk. So
Yeah.
uh, I think the outcome isn't good, but it's going to take a while. That's how I see it.
Hmm. I also recommend viewers to watch my video a few days from last week, a few days before the strike, where I shared my view for what would happen in the Middle East. That was maybe 3, 4 days before the strike. I said that I was seeing a strike actually very clearly. It would be integrated with Israel's activity. I also mentioned that I saw Iran actually countering and fighting back and continuing, the war in the Middle East. I totally agree with you when you said look at Russia and what happened. I actually don't think we don't need to go as far as Russia. Let's just go to Gaza, which is significantly smaller than Iran. And that was supposed to be so easy to eradicate Hamas, and Hamas is not eradicated. And Gaza, this small Palestinian area, is just tiny. And still, Hamas is still present, and the hostages are still there. So compare that to the size of Iran. It shows the difficulty to manage wars in foreign countries with different cultures, with different ways that people respond to conflicts and resistance. There is a movement
Yes.
of resistance.
Yes. Yes. That's right. That's right. And yeah, is that's the 100%. And the truth is, I certainly have very little faith in the current Trump administration to think things through, to actually cover all the ground so that they properly anticipate. They, like one general expressed it as, you think about, if I do this, and then if how they respond, what do we respond to their response, there, which is where they are now. But that's not the way Trump operates. Trump
No,
tends to say, this is it, this is the way it is, and then he does all kinds of mental tricks and mental communication patterns to try to tell you, oh, really, this is what I was doing in the first place. But it isn't true. Like what he did with the tariffs, he implements, oh, too much, okay, let's bring them back. Oh, let's put back something else because, oh, let's uh, not, we won't arrest the people that are in the restaurant business anymore because someone called them, that is a friend of his. Then Steve Miller says, no, we have to keep arresting these people. This is the way these people work. So my confidence in their ability to do this properly is very low. So my feeling is they thought, we'll do the strike. Now here, this is, by the way, classic in astrology, Jupiter. When Jupiter is misplaced, which is what happened to Trump starting June 10th, it switched from his sign to the next sign. He's in a zone now where his usual exaggeration, overconfidence,
hmm
all of that is ramping up. And he believes things that probably aren't true, about the
yeah.
situation. And so that's why it's happening in this way.
Yeah, and I think what you describe is like the strategic level. It's like a chess game. You have to think like a chess game where you think multiple steps ahead and what the opponent might do. He is not capable of doing that. He doesn't have the mental faculty. I don't think he has the clarity of mind, and I don't think he's too lazy to really put the work in place. That's also another component. And it was also interesting to me, kind of going to your point with this energy, that there were comments today about regime change. Well, that's typical as well, where the primary goal was to remove the enrichment of uranium by Iran. You're switching goal halfway. You have not even completed the first goal, which is to eradicate the uranium capabilities. So how can you be successful when you switch goals on permanently? You not achieve any goals.
No, no, and well, the other thing is that came from him, but his people were on the TV shows yesterday saying the opposite. All of them
Of course,
all in line were saying, no, this is just a one strike thing. We have no interest in regime change. And he
and
was tweeted,
change.
well, why wouldn't we have a regime change? I mean, it's remarkable how the Republican Party, in almost all instances, it's as though they have a place they go to for the talking point. So then there'll be a
Yes,
sentence that they all repeat, but then Trump doesn't necessarily join that, and then you get different voices saying different things. So this, by the way, one of the things that in the astrology that is uh, at least not 100% similar, but very close, is what happened to George W. Bush in the spring of 2003. He said on that aircraft carrier, he said, mission accomplished. That was because
yeah.
he had a lot of Jupiter, confidence, right? But the Saturn was coming after that. That's what this guy is facing, the exact same
Whoa.
thing. He's got the Jupiter making noise, and Saturn is coming in the back. Saturn does not let you get away with anything. It calls you to account and brings things to a head, and not in a good way. And when you see that in this way, he and Netanyahu are totally linked. There are a lot of points of agreement in their charts.
hmm
That's why Netanyahu is one person that he will listen to more than others. Although I think Netanyahu there took advantage of him by taking action and forcing him in a way to follow through, because he probably realized, well, no, Israel is winning, so if I get in there and we throw some
I
bombs,
can
then
win too.
I
Yep.
can win too, and then I can say look, I can get a Nobel Peace Prize, but you have to be thinking you get Nobel Peace Prizes by throwing bombs on countries. The world we live in is so completely crazy, that even these discussions would take place. So bottom line is that is the the Saturn energy is the major threat, in play here. The thing is that Saturn's movement is that this year it only dips into Aries first 2 degrees. Although the thing about that is that it's inside Aries up to the second degree only, then it backtracks, but it's gonna do it's called a station in astrology. That happens in kind of in the middle of July. So the month of July, from my vantage point, looks really complicated based on that alone. The fact that those planets are stationing, which, they're doing this, Saturn and Neptune, they did it last year in the same zone, and that's when we had the major switch in the Democratic Party, from Biden had his bad debate, and there was a lot of topsy-turvy energy. Well, now we're getting topsy-turvy energy, pardon me, in Aries, which is a warlike sign. So that's why this is happening, right? But it's not deep enough by degree to really affect Trump and Netanyahu. But it does that in 26. And if you don't think
Okay.
that these situations can go on for months, just wait and you'll see, because that's the more
Yes.
likely outcome.
I agree. I feel like it will go on. I feel also something that I intuitively understood is I've been sharing in my videos really struggles with the US economy and global economy in the summer and the fall. And I was always a little perplexed. Where is this coming from? Because the only evidence that I got of that would be the impact of the tariffs, which is real, but I always felt this was not enough to create this kind of economic depression. But I think if you combine the impact of the tariff plus the impact of this war on the economy, then you have a much more understanding of the root of what could be higher inflation, lower demand due to consumer demand being low. People are worried and not buying. They're delaying their purchases because people start to get worried and scared. That to me is we're starting to see, and I'm starting to understand why I was seeing this depression coming in the summer, going into the fall. So I really feel that, and I feel more confirmed with that. I don't know, in astrology, you have a way to look at the economy. Do you also feel this way?
I do, although the same as you, I was just focusing primarily on the tariff impact because what you can see is, the Saturn moves in a couple of degrees, then it comes back, starting in September. It starts to move back, and does a dead stop at the end of the year in a very compromising place for Trump. My read on that was prior to this, that's the impact of tariffs, because the
Same.
reason is those degrees were the degrees he was triggering when he implemented the tariffs, which every person with economic knowledge or even basic common sense was saying this does not make sense. When you do this kind of thing, you trigger higher prices, you trigger supply chain problems, all these things were being said. But like anything, it tends to take a while because sometimes they stockpile things,
Yes, of course.
I mean, sometimes things will happen immediately, but more of the time
No,
you give it enough.
there's
But
a delay.
now you've got this added problem because yeah, you're totally right. Now you're introducing, for example, there's nothing, it wouldn't be unusual at all to see gas go up 50% in price if they start, holding back tankers and I mean, who knows? Usually this is the way it works when there are problems, military.
Including delays in international logistics, flight routes, boat routes. Um, um, you, this is a region of the world where there's a lot of traffic, business, and logistics, geographically speaking. And I mean, obviously, a lot of money. I
Yeah.
mean, like Qatar, Arab Emirates, Saudi. I mean, so this is also kind of interesting from that standpoint because a lot of Trump's money is in that region of the world.
Yeah, yeah, no, and you would have thought that he would use that logic or that argument to think a little more clearly about stirring up the pot, creating this kind of thing. But this is where the way his mind is, which by the way, he won elections by pretending to be a peacemaker. Someone that has Mars rising next to the ascendant is actually a warmonger, someone who wants to dominate and attack, and this is the way he is. I mean, is this a mystery to anyone that the man is aggressive and belligerent? He wants to win. He wants to run over people. So
A bully. Yeah,
the opportunity presented itself. Now, most of the time, he doesn't like war scenarios because even he, in his pea brain, realizes that how dangerous it is because it can bounce back on you. But I think he thought that this would be an easy thing. But this is classic Jupiter, which he's done before. I remember in 2019 when Jupiter was very strong in his chart, and he was coming off that election loss in the midterms, and Bill Barr was coming in, the lawyer, and Bill Barr helped him, the attorney general at the time.
yep,
He
yep, yep.
helped him to with the Mueller report. Bill Barr said, no, nothing to see here, which was, of course, scandalous, but he did that. And Trump immediately, like within hours, as soon as he realized this Mueller guy is no threat to me, then he went to try to see if he could extort Zelensky by saying, hey, we'll send you the weapons, but you need to find some dirt on Biden. And of course, that blew up in his face because the next thing you
Yep.
know, it was revealed, then he was impeached. And the
Preached.
thing is, I mean, the point is that you can say none of that matters because he survived the impeachment, but he didn't get reelected.
True.
Basically, the end of 19 and then going into 2020, things got really rough for Trump, right? And he lost. Now, that's Saturn through cardinal signs. He doesn't like it in cardinal signs. That's where
Mhm.
Saturn is now. Saturn gets deeper into the cardinal signs next year.
Wow.
You can't get out of your transits. The one thing about astrology that is 100% true is you've got the transits, you're not getting out of those. Now, then,
Yeah.
what the astrologer can't necessarily say is those transits will be this exactly. Because, for example, now he's also, I think, diminishing on the health level. He might not even make it
Of
to be able
course.
to talk about any of this. He might disappear for a different reason. But the idea that you're going to do well under those Saturn transits is crazy. And when you see that the other guy is in the same transits, I mean, this is very ironic because Netanyahu is in the same cross. In astrology, when you get caught in a cross where you're in the same sign region, and it can also be because birds of a feather flock together. It's almost like they go
Yeah.
together to the
Mm.
party, and they think, oh, it's going to be a winning party. I wouldn't put any money on that. That's my opinion, based on what I
And
know.
let's not forget that the coalition that Netanyahu holds in the very recent confidence vote, he had 2 seats. He kept it by only 2 seats, meaning that he doesn't really have a strong majority. Yeah, he has a majority, but it's holding by a string. And so I feel like and I think I mentioned that in some of my videos, like I wouldn't be surprised to see a regime change in Iran and in Israel over time. I'm not saying soon, but really over some fairly recent
Yeah,
time. For
yeah,
yes,
no. It's. I mean, this is the thing that when you see the kind of energy he's dealing with in 26, Netanyahu, and how thin his majority is because in
yes,
Israel they're at war with they were at war with Hamas, now they're at war with Iran. The public will always give you at least 50%, when at least they really should be giving you 90%.
yes.
I think he's getting some number above. But if things stall, if they start to see that, hey, this thing isn't ending, then it'll be, why did you do this? We need a different kind of thing and different kind of leadership. Yeah.
There are questions in Israel about why putting all these efforts on Iran when we still have hostages, and
Yeah, no,
why not
sure,
putting the
sure.
efforts on freeing the hostage? I mean, that's a valid question. And so it's also the other aspect is if we look at just what happened very recently in the last few hours with Iran attacks to the military base, such as in Qatar, and I know the other one, I don't know where the other one is. It was in Kuwait or I forgot the other one.
I think, yeah,
Um,
it's in that region. They're attacking bases in the Middle East. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I feel like it was a military base in Qatar, and yeah, I forgot. Yeah, but that also by default bring those countries into the situation, right? Because yes, it's an US base that was targeted, but in country.
Yeah, I mean, again, war is very complicated. You know, they talk about the fog of war. You know, it's a statement that
Mm,
has been made. It's very complicated. It's
mm,
even though, of course, the U.S. has got the biggest military and Russia has many nuclear weapons. And but you often think, you know, they talk out of Russia. We're going to throw a nuclear weapon. If you do that to anybody, you are signing your own death warrant. You know, Israel, by the way, Israel is a nuclear armed country. Now,
yes.
thing about that is, you know, you ask yourself, why does Iran want a nuclear weapon? I think Netanyahu is using the argument that they would throw a nuclear weapon at them in a missile. But that's like saying we're both going to die. And I find with these people, by the
Mm.
way, these people, Iranians, it's like the North Koreans. They don't want to die. The North Koreans, they don't want to be removed, but they're not interested in, you know, we're going to throw a nuclear weapon at someone.
No,
The response is that they shoot back. Nuclear weapons are like we're both in a room pointing a gun at each other. Nobody gets out alive. You know, we should both, okay, we both have a big gun,
exactly. Well,
put
they
it
they're
down.
they're there not to be used.
To be used, exactly, exactly. So, and that may be that's the argument Iran will use, but, you know, really the point here though becomes, okay, we had this strike. Now, let's say that right now they're attacking the bases, but let's say that they stop. Let's say that Iran stops throwing missiles at Israel and at any American bases. But then what do you have? What's next?
Well,
Because,
we're going back to the goal has not been achieved with the
well, exactly,
uranium.
because I mean,
Yeah.
they can stop their activity and they can just go back to building a nuclear weapon.
Mhm.
So what do? You attack them again? Where does this go? It's pretty crazy. Let's just say that. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we maybe should I throw a couple
Sure. Yeah.
cards on some of those questions,
Sure.
just to kind of get a sense of what we get from spirit? So what should we ask?
Well, ask, for example, one way would be the near term. I mean, people are
Yeah.
interested, I think, in
Yes.
the summer of in the summer of 2025, uh, the situation for, let's say, Netanyahu and Trump. They're the two biggest
Okay.
leaders in this conflict that have a lot at stake. In,
Yep. And I feel like asking July, just starting with July,
July, okay.
then the summer.
Well,
Yeah.
July is critical. It's a really critical
Yes.
month.
Yes. Yes. Let's just look at July. Mhm. The first card, the Nine of Wands. So this is a card of you can see someone usually it has to deal with someone ill, someone who's hurt, someone who's trying to heal from hurt. You can see has a bandage over his head. You're literally, hurt. So that already gives an indication of Trump's political power being hurt as well as likely his health. Okay. The next card, can't make that up. The Fool. The Fool. So literally acting like a fool, but also being on edge, taking risks,
Taking risks.
a sense of not having a strategy, a sense of flying by the seat of your pants and not really having a path forward. It's like go here, go there, do this, do that.
Hmm.
And then the final card is the Eight of Pentacles, which is a sense of work and money. And so I feel like there's also going to be possibly some discussions already about the economy, work and the economy. So, I mean, I wouldn't say this is a catastrophic reading, but this is pretty bad because there's no sign of success, there's no strategy, there's what I feel is a serious health issue that's becoming more predominant. And what scares me the most in what I see for Trump is he has absolutely no plan. The Fool is the number zero. It's like it's going nowhere in circles.
Hmm.
So does that align with what you see more from an astrology standpoint?
The astrology, yes, yes, because the way the astrology is in the summer, to me, it's at best a holding pattern of some kind with bad decisions
Yeah,
being made. I don't see the finality. No, this idea that
no, no.
we solve this problem, now Iran will become a democracy, or Iran will become this new system that will now cooperate with us. And I think that has a strong chance of changing down the road from where it
Yeah,
is today, but not in the immediate sense. That would really, really surprise me if it happened that way.
no. Plus, let's also remember the Fool, which has this number zero, is not even a beginning, clearly not an ending. But if anything, it's a beginning. It's just someone could say it's just the beginning. So clearly, there's no resolution. Yeah.
I have a question for you. Is the Nine of Wands also associated with uh, like you're in the middle of a battle and you want to try one more time? You want to see if you can uh, somehow keep fighting and hope that you can overcome this big obstacle that
Yes, coupled with a sign of exhaustion.
with exhaustion.
You try to kind of it's like restart a car that doesn't want to start a little bit. That just like you keep trying. Um, and then you pretty much also, it's a number nine, so numerologically, like you're also finishing a cycle that you started. There's this idea of a cycle that is not finished and one that hasn't really started. Um, let's look at Netanyahu
Okay.
energy for July. I have a couple cards that flew, and I saw one, the devil.
Oh yeah, there you go.
So
That'll do it.
that obviously doesn't look very good for him, right? Because it's those attachment. You can't break those attachment. It's like you hunt. It's like it shows both the a bit of the craziness and then also the bond that it's almost like you're stuck in your own jail. That's the way that I read the card. And then the Nine of Swords, which to me, this is a card of attack. This is going after and with the sword attack. So likely Israel with Netanyahu will very much in a very strong attacking position, but with some backfiring. Like it starts to be hell, literally.
Mhm.
So that doesn't bode very well for Netanyahu. Let's put one more card. The Six of Cups. This is a card of families. And so that to me also talks about the Israeli people that will feel the pressure.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I can totally see it. Yeah, I can totally see I mean, because this was one of the talking points that is being passed around by the Republican senators. They're saying, no, we attacked, but we're not attacking anymore. Now the Israelis will attack more. I heard Lindsey Graham say this, and so that the Israelis will
Do the job.
now do the job. But what exactly is the job? I mean, I guess they can keep, maybe they can bomb cities. I don't know. I don't know what their plan is, to be honest.
Well, and it's like multiple wars. There's Iran, there's Gaza, and who knows? You know, um, I might want to pull a card or two for Iran as a country,
Okay.
just so we look at all three. Um, and I'm not looking at the supreme leader because I don't want this to be personal, but more like Iran as a country.
Hmm.
In July, Iran as a country. Couple cards. First card is justice. So I don't interpret it here as a card of that literally justice, but a sense of finding balance, right? And dealing with multiple things and trying to find balance. In other words, you could say scrambling because they're gonna try to like just hold it in my views. The next card is strength.
Mm,
And so that to me talks about there's an element of resistance that
right.
comes. And then there's the Queen of Pentacles, which one is very interesting. It talks the Pentacles are material things, money, resources. So
Hmm.
they're getting support from where I don't know. But in you could possibly say with the Queen of Pentacles, there's an element that could represent Russia just from the energy of it, but I don't know if it's that. I would leave it as if I had to summarize, I think Iran will be trying to survive and resist and find resources that they need to do so.
Right. And essentially extend the conflict rather than
Okay.
rather than
Yeah,
surrendering, and you're not getting any surrender
no,
energy
no. And
or
in all three cases, for the three draws we did, there's nothing that signifies an end or peace, or there's nothing that would say a resolution. Nothing.
nothing. So essentially it's conflict that has been opened that
That continues.
continues. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. That makes the most sense to me. And what you said earlier about the economic issues going into the second half of the year, that's also, to me, it's pretty clear.
I'm afraid of that because for the US, the economy this impacts everyday people. The war doesn't impact everyday people, but the economy does. The gas price does. So the economy is a big factor, both for all of us, but also politically for MAGA. If MAGA starts to feel the pain, remember, it's that plus the bill.
The bill, oh yeah, the bill is in the background. I know there are all these forces. I mean, really, the bottom line in all this, from my perspective, is that I think what is driving people crazy at the moment, and is justifiable. You're seeing so many things happening at the same time, such as we have this situation now, and I'm reading this article that measles is breaking out in at levels we haven't seen in years, and we have this person in charge who's like a health crank who
I know.
thinks has these ideas, and he's following through on his ideas. So then the problems multiply, and the best explanation, and a Republican said this. I heard him say it, and I thought, yeah, I agree with you because I thought the same thing, and I've been thinking this literally for years, and it's only accelerated in recent months. The way he put it was, we're in a period of time when the only way you're going to restore people's faith in good governance and good institutions is by seeing the problems when you don't have that, because the
True.
people that are in charge are making so many mistakes and putting everybody at risk in so many different ways. And even if you don't get everybody back, because you never do,
Absolutely.
the idea is to get back enough people, to be able to get rid of the, the people that are there. And I've been saying since last year, right after the election, I said, look, the 2026 elections look really complicated for the GOP. But of course, at the time, people were saying, "What elections? He's going to stop all the elections." By the way, can you throw a card on that? That I would be very interested in that. What do you get about the idea of bringing the GOP to account through the election process? And I mean, in other words, cover through your answer their attempts to cheat, whatever they attempt to do to stop the fact that voters will vote and give them an
So
up.
so the question is, will there be voter suppressions or will there be more clean elections in at the midterms or
Well, whether or not there is that, the outcome of the election, it doesn't matter whether they try to do voter suppression.
okay, okay.
It only matters if they do enough voter suppression to win the election. If they don't win, who cares? Let them suppress all they like.
Pull some cards. Mhm. So the first card that I got was the Four Swords. This is basically something that they don't expect. They're not really active, they're passive, and you could say also that they're resting on their laurels. The Temperance give them a false sense of security, going with the flow, waiting. And then my final card was the Tower. So there's like something like the destruction. There's a destruction coming, as we get to the midterms in terms of their ability to hold their constituent, I would say.
I just did in my own deck. I opened the deck and I got the tower too. That's pretty
Oh,
interesting.
you did?
And
Oh,
then
yeah.
I asked, how do the Democrats do in that election? And I got the Ace of Cups. I would say that's pretty good.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, is that would you
And
agree?
I just pulled a card for Democrats and I got the Queen of Swords, which is, to me, this is a victory card. Um, when we look at it's almost like fighting. To me, the way I look at it is like Joan of Arc, right? You come and you just come through. And
Right.
so I feel like it feels very like a battle, that as the midterms will likely be. But what's interesting in this reading, and obviously, I mean, we'll have a lot of time until the midterms to read more, but the arrogance of the Republicans, they don't seem to be concerned. When you look at those cards, they don't seem concerned, and it's just hit them.
Right. Yeah. Well, okay. See, this is where, remember that you and I did a collaboration. I think now it goes back 2 months or more when we were talking about his cabinet.
Hmm.
And you tried in astrology to match as many charts as possible. And the pattern that I saw, which Trump is exhibiting for sure, and people like Tulsi Gabbard, I forget now, but there were a number of I don't have it in front of me,
Um,
but there were multiple people.
Except
Well, except
Rubio. Yeah, yeah,
also RFK's in the middle of this,
yes.
100%. The problem they have is that in 2026, as we move into the spring and summer, the Saturn just lands on their head in a major way. And so now one of the things that can happen is that he can start firing people. He always does that when things don't work. The solution is replace people and see if the new person does an any better job. The problem is that his own chart is facing the same issues, right? So I'm staying with my perspective that if he's able to get through it, because I know I've heard you say that you've seen Trump in a wheelchair at some point, and
Yeah,
although
a
that looks
surgery,
stubborn,
a wheelchair. Yes, I mean,
yeah,
and I think the more time goes, the more I feel strong about this. Like I feel like he's already facing something serious.
Right, but that wouldn't stop him from trying to run things from the wheelchair. He might still do that. So the point being, though, wheelchair, no wheelchair,
With
when you
chair,
have aspects like this, like the problem with these aspects is that you could be a very, very good, solid, sensible politician. It isn't easy when you have a planet like Saturn, bearing down on you. It's complicated. It's worse for a guy like this because he deliberately goes out of his way to do things that a planet like Saturn will punish you extra hard for. That's true. But regardless, it's not a good scene. And it's the same with Netanyahu. Netanyahu now is in cycles that, to me, are very suggestive of a career-ending period, that he's facing as we go into the next couple of years. But that's the problem. We have to be patient enough to get there. And yes, I will agree that in the meantime, you have to find ways to stay calm because what we're seeing does not incline you to stay
not
calm.
no.
No, it inclines you to freak out. But this is life, and you have to remember that the world has been through these things before. And picture what someone might have been thinking in 1943 when, can you
Absolutely.
imagine being there? Or in 1862 or 63 when there was this tremendous conflict going on. And that's something that uh, probably couldn't be avoided in the current period we're in. The cluster of planets are suspiciously in the same places. And so, through a variety of factors, I know Trump is key in this whole thing as the primary agent, but some agent or other would have done it. That's my bottom line on this.
Of course, staying calm. And also the other thing to keep in mind is we all can see that this is really the end of an era for all those people, Trump, Netanyahu, Putin, they're all coming to an end. Like we know their end is not necessarily tomorrow, but it's not years and years and years. Like they're coming to an end. We're turning the page on those people with completely a new generation, new views of the world. Uh, I really want to also visualize the after because there's an after and we will really survive this, but also feel like the pressure of and turning the page from all those people, which then gives so much hope for the future. I feel like I'm really convinced that when we really turn the page of all those people, dictators, tyrants, there's a lot to look for in terms of how we think the world and we as nations, as people, we rebuild from all of this. But right now we're on the last few moments of those crazy people, and it's painful. But the point I'm trying to make is there's an after, and the after looks so much more promising.
I agreed. And
Mhm.
it's interesting that you mentioned Putin because Putin has a very similar pattern to Netanyahu, even though his circumstances are very different. Netanyahu's problem astrologically is a cluster of planets in Libra because Saturn is squaring. Well, who do you think has a cluster of planets in Libra? Putin. He's got all these planets. And for Putin, they're in the worst possible house in his chart, which he's one that it could be basically in his health, but that's the top level. But it could also just be enemies within his country, or the fact that who knows? I mean, it just things can line up when something like a planet like Saturn opposes. But like Netanyahu, his planets are later in the cycle. I was actually saying this, in 2022, 2023, but I was in a sense not being disciplined and saying, yeah, but it's in other words, giving the years, and pointing to it's much more of a pattern in 26, 27 than in
Yeah,
25. In 25, Putin is doing the same thing as Netanyahu. He is overconfident. He thinks he has control of the situation. But that's, again, misplaced Jupiter. It's when Jupiter inclines you to think beyond your capacities. So it's an overconfidence problem. Yeah, that's the bottom line. So
yeah.
yeah, I agree with you that the other side is better. I don't. I mean, I'm not saying it would be utopia, but it'll be good to get around a lot of the thinking of these people, you know.
And just new generations of leaders, new, things that we have tried that didn't work, and populations, like I I don't want to be too optimistic, but there's clearly gonna be a large portion of MAGAs that are realizing what Trump is doing and how it improves or not their own personal situations.
Right.
When they feel themselves in a world of hurt, that I feel will make them think, because at this time we can't really, they're not really seeing all this, but it's always, and it's true for a lot of people, a lot of us. It's when it starts to impact you personally, then you start to thinking different. And I think it will. So, and it's not going to be later, it's going to be sooner.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree
Mm,
with you. And even if you don't, again, you don't need all of them. You just need 5%, five, maybe
That's
10% at
also a good
most.
point.
You
Whatever
don't need everybody.
switch, yes,
Yeah, because that
good
that is
point.
what is that's what's been happening is that there is dissatisfaction with institutions, which much of that they themselves kept promoting through lies and deception. That's another thing that's happening too, that it's a cycle that is starting to change, but it doesn't really again kick in until next year, the year after. Is the Neptune has been in Pisces since 2011, and I've said this a number of times in my videos that Neptune in Pisces accelerates information, and it has been good for the promotion of good information, which is great. But the problem is that it's also good for disinformation. And I remember in 2011, the lies and the crazy things that were being said, and by especially by the GOP, that would say the opposite of what was happening, and then they have a news organization that promotes these lies. But
Yes,
when planets make these shifts into new signs, the old way of doing things becomes uh, either less important, there could even be a reaction to it where all of a sudden being truthful becomes, the important way to be, which right now it seems like it doesn't matter. You can say anything and voters are not reacting against the lies as
yes.
much as they should. So yeah. All right.
You
Well, I
have a
guess
very
we've.
good point. I think one of the very interesting point that didn't hit me until now was when you said we only 5%. 10% of MAGA switching their mind makes a difference in the general election.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
so we don't need all of them to see the
No,
light. It only takes a small portion, and that's doable. That's very doable.
no, yeah, and
Mm,
this
yeah,
again is except for a few times uh, long ago now where there was a major vote for only one candidate of one party. The tendency is that democracies, when you win 60-40, it's a big, big win. If you start to win by 80-20, it's usually because there's a dictator running the country
yes, of
telling you how to
course.
vote. And so you can go back to the 70s when Nixon was committing all kinds of crimes and his VP was an even bigger criminal, Spiro Agnew. He was taking money in envelopes at the White House. It was ridiculous, like a gangster presidency. And Nixon was impeached or was about to be impeached, so he left. And there were all kinds of people supporting them. He had support in the 30s, which is millions of people. They didn't want to change parties, even
No.
though the leader had been so terrible. So
Yes.
I think neither you or I are saying that this changes and then everybody turns completely away from MAGA.
No.
I could see the MAGA thing being a problem into the next decade. Like people still
Oh,
trying
there's
to,
always going to be, exactly. But
yeah,
it's really a matter of quantity, and also there's MAGA, but there are also independents. A number of independents voted for Trump. Those are even easier to convince.
true, yeah, true. So it's all, I mean, see, this really
Mm,
comes down to, it always comes down to the notion that if people could really believe that the problem can still be solved through elections, and this is where I know I've heard plenty of chatter on my channel where viewers will say, yes, you say a lot of things, but it doesn't matter because they will just, for example, Trump could say, well, we're not going to have any elections. in
Yeah,
2020.
I've heard that argument. Yeah.
Does that seem to you
No, no,
like,
I know we will. Feel very strong that we will have midterms.
okay, right. Well, then the next step is, will they, well, we already did. We already covered
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
saying
I mean,
exactly. So,
yes.
no need to beat a dead
No need to
horse.
review.
Okay. All right. We'll stop there. And the way this is going, we've been meeting a little, about a month, every month, but maybe we should leave the possibility that we should talk next week.
Yeah.
We'll
You
see.
mean
We'll see what
tomorrow?
happens.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, tomorrow afternoon. No, we're not being serious now, but seriously, right now the situation is moving really fast, so there may be something to cover in the very short
Yep.
term. So, all right,
Okay.
but for
Thank you
now,
for having me. Yeah.
oh, it's a pleasure. Great speaking with you. We'll say goodbye to everyone for now. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.